Okay, I'm going to have you come back and we're going to talk through what you decided. So, it really does take a lot of time and discussion when you go through these things. And what we've also found is, having a group of people to talk about what level you think it's at is really important. So when we get going into assessment, evaluation, and those things, it is, working with a group really helps you figure out exactly what level you need to be at, how the items might need to be edited, just having that camaraderie between the people that you work with. So I want to first, before we go through these and hear what you were thinking about the level, tell you that these are all from either Smarter Balance, or they came from NAEP, which is a national assessment, and they were all stems of or descriptions of what the assessment items were. So that's where these statements came from. They weren't just found. So how about the first one? What level, depth of knowledge level, did you think that this statement was referring to? What'd you say?
I said 3.
A 3? Mm-hmm. How many people said about a 3? Okay. And why did you think that it was a 3?
Well, I know that compare and contrast, we talked about compare and contrast as, I think, referenced in level 2, but yet it seemed with the multiple media, different texts and such, that was required a little more complexity.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any other thoughts that they wanted to share before I show you the answer key? Because I did take them from a source that had them. Yes.
So the discussion we just had about it, because we were split between 2 and 3, is the difference in how you ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
So it's coming back to that, how are you asking the question? Because it is compare and contrast is found in both 2 and 3. So
Yes. So the content that's tied to that compare and contrast and how it's written, without the actual item, it could go either way.
Right, because
Yeah.
we both could provide an example of, well, this would probably be more of a level 2 question using that exact same
Okay.
standard.
Were you going to share something? Okay. So the item that this was pulled from was a level 3, but it was probably what you're saying. And it really does depend on what the context of the assessment item is. So we did pretty well on that one. How about the second one? What were you thinking for the second one? I have a 2 over here. How many of you thought it was a 2? I guess we could just use our fingers. Okay, there's lots of hands that are not up, so who would like to share a different idea? And then I'm going to come back to Josh and make him explain why he thinks it's a 2, but did someone think that it was higher or lower than a 2? I think we ate too many cookies.
I thought it was a 1 because it's just remembering stuff.
Okay. All right, Josh, why do you think it was a 2?
Well, first let me state that I could have copied the answers because we knew the key was done, but
Shh.
I didn't do that. I picked 2. I know to inform about or explain the topic. I don't know. I just felt it was a little bit more rigorous than it wasn't identify. It was, use precise language, domain-specific vocabulary. I think that's an important piece to that, domain-specific vocabulary, to inform about or explain the topic. I just felt like that was more than just identify.
You're doing more than identifying. You're actually taking what you know and then you're informing someone else about it. So I figure it had to be more than 1.
Okay. So this one came from an item that was a 2, and it was about the explanation part. So if it was just identifying the pieces and not really doing much with it, and if the item didn't have them really explaining in detail, I could see where you could be in that realm. But this one, with them applying that to explain it, did bring it up to a 2. How about the area and perimeter question? I have a 1 up here. How many people said 1? How many people said 2? How many people said 3? All right, so I won't go to 4, but I don't think it's an application. So how about someone that said 1? Would you mind sharing why you think it's a 1?
because it says to apply the formulas, which in 1 it says apply algorithm or formula, e.g. area perimeter.
Okay. How about, who said 2? Would one of you mind sharing at your table?
I think we just went up to a 2 because of the fact that it was in a context.
Okay.
If it was a real world problem, that
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to understand that you have to use that formula and how do you within that context.
Mm-hmm.
The real world.
The real world.
More applicable. You
Yeah.
have to use application.
So the application piece. So how about it? Was someone that, would you like to share why you thought it was a 3? No? Okay, I won't press you. So I.
It's applying a concept, but she read off her rubric, so now I.
Okay, so this is where, remember when Allison was showing her example, she said it could be a 1, 2. If the problem was more like here's a picture and they're saying the shadow of a tree and here's your, whatever it is, or I guess that's a triangle, not a rectangle. I should not teach math anymore. But if they were just saying here's a fence, what's the area that the horse gets to run around inside? That's one better? Okay. That was actually a rectangle. Then that would be more the 1 because it's just if the numbers are on the side. But, if it was a real world problem and they had to actually figure out that they had to apply that one, then it would boost it up a bit. So, go ahead. Please.
This is where the standard for math get a little tricky, right? So the end is in the end of the sentence is the trick. So it says real world and mathematical problems. So if you're going to use real world problems, like she was just saying, then that's going to be where your 2 is. But if you're just using mathematical problems, you just have this lame old picture of a rectangle on there with dimensions on it. That's where it's just down to 1 because you're just applying the algorithm to it.
If it's a real world problem where it's just like on a piece of paper and there's a picture of a fence, wouldn't that be?
Right, and I think when they say real world, it wouldn't have the accompanying, you would have to pull out those pieces from it, because in the real world, it wouldn't have already been drawn for you nice and neat with the stuff on it. So that's where I think the difference comes in there with the 1 and the 2. And there's lots of standards that are written that way in the math, where they have real world and mathematical in the same standard, so.
Thanks. How about the 4th one? So now this is social studies. I want to go to the social studies table. Or the the studs. What were you thinking, studs, for number 4? 2. How many people thought it was a 2 in the room? I have head nodding. Would someone that's not from the studs table explain why you think it's a 2? Thank you.
We actually kind of thought 1 and 2, but because it says provide examples of the concepts, that's why we bumped it, or I did, to a 2.
2. This one was a 2 with the example that they gave, the question that we pulled out. How about the nuclear reactions question? Science people, would you like to answer the nuclear science question or nuclear reaction question? What do you think that one was?
The 1, because you're just identifying that something happened. That feels like a multiple choice question.
Okay. How many people thought it was a 1? All right, that was pretty good. How about the last one? Analyze and explain multiple perspectives. A 4. I have a 4. Raise your hand if you thought it was a 4. And who can I pick on that wants to share why it's a 4? Go ahead. Yes, good. So it seems like we're all at least on the same page of where the statements are at. Our next activity, what we're going to do is look at now assessment items in particular so that we can hone in. Because, some of those we said, well, it's very dependent on the question. So now we're going to look at the question level. So you can go ahead and put that sheet away.